I'm headed out to Tampa next week to speak with the Arab community. And it's not going to be a comfortable conversation because many of the people there who say that they're pro-Palestinian are cheering the death of or the demise of Assad. But you understand now there will never be a Palestinian homeland ever. You've killed it. Your desire to get rid of Assad has killed Palestine, destroyed it. Because now no one can tell me how we're going to get from A to Z now. There was a path that could be carved out that allowed for a two-state solution that then would morph into a one-state solution as Israel continued to devolve. But with Israel winning, so in order for this to not happen, Israel's going to have to lose. And I just challenged somebody to come up with a scenario now where Israel loses. The only thing that made Israel lose was the resilience and the capabilities of the axis of resistance. Axis of resistance has been deeply wounded, if not mortally wounded. They lost Syria. Syria was a very critical component of the axis of resistance. It's gone.
A lot of people are panicking because they saw Syria collapse. I was on Danny Haifeng's channel recently, and I said that if multipolarism was all powerful, there wouldn't be this conflict between the US and the multipolar world. The world would already just be multipolar. This is a struggle between US primacy, dominion over the planet, and multipolarism, a balance of power between nations and the primacy of national sovereignty. That is the struggle that we are in right now. It is a large, I would say, war, almost like a World War III that is taking place just through hybrid warfare and just something just short of all-out war. And I don't know how long that will last.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo, co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson. We're online at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as @DonEduardoBarca on Instagram. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. Oh, and we also have shirts, of course. So if you would like to get a shirt from What's Left, please do so through there. All right. Andy, we had a topic.
We did.
And the topic was to watch a film, something easy for our episode so that we can review it. And that film, a documentary film that I had recommended, was called Surveilled. And I'm hoping that we could review it. I haven't seen it yet because I was hoping to see it for our episode, but you decided to change gears on me.
I did. And I sent you an article by Derek Brose about a subject that we want to talk about, which is surveillance and immigration and the interconnection of those, right?
Yes, I did get it.
And during the interview with that Derek Brose was doing with Ryan Christian on The Last American Vagabond, he mentioned a movie he had recently seen called Surveilled, saying that people really should see that. So in addition to changing the subject, I am now telling you that somebody that I think is important for us to pay attention to is also telling us to watch Surveilled, and I scotched it.
Well, that consequences, Andrew. I will forever remember.
Yeah, I know. Oh, believe me, folks, this will be coming back around, not just a year later, possibly 5 years from now, possibly 10 years from now. It is never forgotten. And he's not mad.
Oh, my goodness.
Eduardo is not mad. He just doesn't forget.
I can see all of my exes looking at this and thinking, oh, we know.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to... I'm still under the weather.
Yeah.
And I just like to give a shout out to Jess. And she called me and she left we do audio messages from time to time and she left a message and I heard back from her and it's nice to hear from her. And I'm hoping she'll be on sometime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we are going to be talking about the axis of resistance today. People would have seen the opener, which Scott Ritter was talking about the axis of resistance. So so I want to talk about that today. But before we get into that, and this may be related to, hopefully maybe even Jessica could join us on that, or Kenny or Hema could join us on the first episode of the new year. Is I think the episode where will probably be the last one we'll put on YouTube. I've been talking with Eduardo some, and we're already at two. We're at 2 strikes right now. One more strike, and our channel it gets cut down on YouTube. It's as people know, it's just ridiculous. You know, you talk about anything and it gets removed. So I don't want to live under that kind of cloud. And I really do feel like it affects me. It affects the show. And so we're not taking our channel down, but we'll do this episode will be on YouTube if it lasts. I think it will. We'll have one more episode. Our next episodes with John Kleisik talking about education under Trump and what's coming, which I think will be a good one. That will be on YouTube as well as all the other platforms we're on. And then the beginning of the year will be, I think, our swan song episode on YouTube. So I urge people to connect with us or follow us on Rumble. We are on other platforms like BitChute. You can hear us on iTunes and Spotify. Eduardo says it each time at the end of the episode what all the different things we're on, Telegram. But if you want to watch us, we're asking you to follow us on Rumble. I'm not saying BitChute's bad. The only problem I've had is some of our past episodes, they don't play. Like the older the episode is, sometimes you try to press play on it and it just gets hung up. So BitChute is not as I don't know. It's just not as stable. And we don't have any illusions that Rumble's Peter Thiel. You know, we don't have any illusions that there's pro censorship sites like YouTube and anti censorship sites like Rumble. All these places, all these internet spaces are censorship spaces. But for now, Rumble is, you can say whatever you want. And so that's where you can hear us. And so I'd urge people to begin to follow. If you're a subscriber here and you want to continue to hear our content, follow us there. So when we make that transition next year, you can be with us. So I hope that's clear.
If anyone wants to debate our decision, which believe me, it was not easy to come to, and Andy wanted to scrap YouTube altogether, please say so in some format, whether it's directly to us on our blog or what's left platforms. That's not like our platforms, but any of the platforms that we're on. And yeah, it's been hard. And sometimes I feel like we're in dystopian times in many of the dystopian novels that I have read, and people speaking in code. Andy does not want to speak in code. He wants to say what he wants to say. I just think we'll reach we won't reach a larger audience, but that's debatable. And here we are, and I've come to it. And it's hard because we've tried to build something here, and we were at a time when Alex Jones was being censored, and I remember quite clearly that I was saying that I really don't care, and now I do care, because if one voice that I don't like is being censored, you get that abuse of power onto others. And here we are now being categorized along with other folks such as Alex Jones and the like, people who do speak on many topics that are uncomfortable or just don't want to be heard by or want to be crafted in a way for the audience that I think, especially in the USA, that like in the 2020 year, only certain voices can be heard.
And Eduardo's being serious when he says if people have doubts about that, like people think that, because Eduardo has more doubts about doing this than I do. If other people feel that way, let us know, because that'll be important. It'll be part of our decision. So that'll help. But I think we'll be telling you more. We'll be repeating this next week, and then I want to have a bye to YouTube episode the first week of January. And I think I want to invite Jessica to come on to it if she can and join us on that episode, and maybe either Hema or Kenny. So
But you'll find us on Rumble.
Exactly. Speaking freely.
Anyhow. All right, let's get back to today's topic. Please introduce it, Andy.
Yeah. So last week we talked about Syria and the surprising fall of Syria. And and as people know, we are critical of the U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine. We describe it as a proxy war. It is a war where United States is using Ukraine as a proxy. And I don't think people always hear this from us, but I think this is what I think. I think is what Eduardo thinks. The people of the Donbass of Eastern Ukraine are proxies for Russia. So they are the people are being used by big powers to fight, so the big powers can fight each other. And many of the people who I've listened to and do listen to, Duran, Brian Berletic, Scott Ritter, you've heard these names before, history legends. Weeb Union, not so much, doesn't talk so much this way, but they will talk about an axis of resistance. And you heard Scott Ritter there talk about an axis of resistance. And specifically, he's saying Syria was part of that axis of resistance, and he's bemoaning the fact. And what is true is the fall of Syria was a definite blow against the side of this war that is Russia, China, and a definite victory for the side of this war that is United States and the West and Israel. So that part I completely agree with Scott Ritter. But there's another part of this where people are like, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. The possibility of really what I think they're saying is the possibility of a multipolar world is ended, and therefore the possibility of justice is ended. And I don't agree with that. And I want to talk about that.
You were asking me what I think the axis of resistance
is?
Yes,
right. Yeah.
I was saying to you that I think it's a coalition of Middle Eastern forces that I think are mostly backed by Iran as the most powerful force, mostly led by Lebanon and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Palestine, the Syrian armed forces in Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen.
Yep.
And this is what I think of the axis of resistance, or what I have come to understand of it from what I've read. And the coalition is comprised of mostly Middle Eastern countries. So, and what I was listening to, what you sent me on Scott Ritter, was that a key component of that was the Syrian armed forces. And now that Assad's been toppled down, as we heard, there will not be any freedom or liberation for Palestinians because of one key element, one important part of that coalition.
Right. Let me ask you a question, because I agree with your description of the axis of resistance, and I think most of the people who are describing the region talk about it that way and confine it to those forces. Maybe they would wonder if Turkey is part of that axis of resistance, or if Egypt could be part of the axis of resistance. But those are all powers confined to the Middle East. Let me ask you this. Is Russia part of the axis of resistance?
Not as I've read or understood it, but I know that Russia has helped Iran, has also bases in Syria, as we have just recently discussed in the last episode. So there is a presence of Russia in the Middle East. And I would go as far as to say that it is part of the axis of resistance, but not as what people think of the axis of resistance is, because mostly people think of the Middle East.
Right. And I think there's something hiding in that, because Syria was occupied by Russia. There were Russian bases on Syria. Syria was not an independent country.
And Assad just found exile. It's now has found, what do you call it again? Edward Snowden has refuge.
Refuge.
The word, not refuge. It's not refuge. Well, anyhow, there's another word for it, but it has asylum. Is it?
Yes. Asylum. Yeah.
asylum in Russia. So you could see that there is a clear connection there.
Yeah, and the reason that I think people want to not talk about it that way is they kind of want to talk about the resistance as an independent force, as a colonial force, not a colonizing force, but a colonial force, one that is resisting colonization. And they don't want to admit that these are already that the axis of resistance they're talking about actually is already a colony of another big power, really Russia. And if you're going to put Iran as the centerpiece of the axis of resistance, then you can't talk about Iran without talking about China. China now owns Iranian ports. China has established financial and military and relationships that make it so that not just China is going to rely on Iranian oil, but they are attempting to develop a relationship with Iran commensurate with the one that the United States has with Israel, where it's like, I don't know what the CIA of China is, but they want to work with essentially the CIA of the Mossad of Iran and work together and collaborate on how to see what's happening in the region and control the region and things like that. So the axis of resistance, if people are being honest, isn't just those forces, it's Russia and China as well. And I think we've often talked about the idea that many people think that there's a multipolar world that's going to deliver us to a new place. That if we can get away from this hegemonic U.S. running the globe thing, and if that Russia or China can deliver us to this multipolar world, that they are basically speaking of Russia and China as an axis of resistance, to a single global U.S. hegemon, and they're implying that that these powers are interested in creating multipolar balance and a checks and balances, a global checks and balances system that checks the most violent forces, which are the ones of the West, and then spreads more egalitarian, more forces that are just interested in commerce and trade and just everyone be as you want to be, as if these forces of China and Russia don't themselves also contain a voracious appetite for markets and resources and control. And often they will speak of some history that they've had. And what I think they're missing is the fact that regardless of their history, we live in a capitalist system where all corporations and all countries must expand their resources, their sphere of influence, their power, their economic power, their military power, because if you are not expanding into space, then someone else is expanding into that space. And if they are expanding into that space, then you are losing. No matter how big you are, if you are not expanding, you are losing. And those are the rules of the profit system, and those are the rules of capitalism. And so underneath most of these people is a misunderstanding about the system we live in. And I will say that that's not true for Brian Berletic. Brian Berletic actually, well, he is not an anti-capitalist, but he will often talk about the profit system. That one of the problems of the U.S. Military is that it's completely run as for-profit, whereas he says that the Chinese and Russian systems are state-run. And in this regard, he sees the limits of the profit system. But for him, what he says is, there's no way there's going to be a revolution in the United States. And I think he doesn't think there's ever going to be a revolution anywhere. So I think what he's left to is basically the idea that if change is going to come, it's going to come from one of the big powers. And I guess I just want to talk about that notion, that this notion that we will be delivered to a better world by an oligarchy somewhere on this globe, I think is deeply flawed, and has the same problem of hopium that we talk about in regards to Obama or Trump. These people who are putting hopium into Russia or China are putting their hope in something that is a unicorn. It doesn't exist. It will never exist, because there will never be peace found with some oligarchy finally gaining the kind of control they want, because their appetite is voracious, not because of greed, but because of the system we live in. And so I guess I just wanted to say that and see what kind of comments or questions you might have.
Well, I think we stand on the same belief that this is the way the world is run. That this is about competition, and capitalism is manifested this way. You are to get bigger and greater and more power, and that is built through profits. And yes, through just gaining monopoly over other countries. That's first. So I agree with you there. What I am curious about is for this idea, this other alternative, that there just isn't going to be a revolution, and therefore we should rely or just jump onto this desire to change, I think, within the system that is going to win or monopolize the entire world. I don't know that this is, the correct path. I no. Excuse me. Let me correct that. I have been there. I have thought that as well. And it could be discouraging when we don't see a working class revolution. And I could see why people do that. Right? So, but I don't think supporting or going in and trying to fight within is you're going to create some sort of I was going to say hueco, this hole in the system, in order for it to topple it down or to bring it down. I just don't think, or to change or to put people in power, or people that seem like they have some sort of revolutionary ideas, but are going to be used as pawns. So I don't know if that is, I don't know. I have left and abandoned that way of thinking.
Yeah. And let me put it this way first. If let's take the possibility of working class revolution, or revolution that takes capitalism, that dismantles capitalism and replaces it with something else. Let's just take that off the table and say that is not possible. Would that mean that that our fortunes would be improved by the fortunes of some oligarchy coming to a new power? Like, does that, if we take revolution off the table, do you get the sense that China finally getting US in the box, or Russia and China containing US in a box, where they feel like they can't take over the Pacific and they no longer have hegemony in Europe and pushing into Asia from that direction? Do you feel like we're going to be at a peaceful time at that point?
I don't think so.
Yeah, like it's just going to be, in fact, at the point of equivalence, at the point at which these powers are militarily and economically, politically equivalent, say, and a colony sees making a deal with China or making a deal with the United States just as bad or just as good, that's actually the possibility of violence is even greater, because that's in a situation where both of these forces look at each other like, I'm not sure, I think I can get over on you, because they're going to be looking for some kind of advantage so they can get over on the other. So even if you took working class revolution off the table, I don't understand how people are able to perceive that a multipolar world of some kind of stable equilibrium could ever exist, because this multipolar world we are not delivered into that multipolar world by a set of people who are like, trying to do this for humanity. These are all oligarchs in every part, and your Russian oligarchs and Chinese oligarchs, these are people who have been bred to want power. And of course, yes, it's within the system that's the biggest reason. But these people come to power by essentially exploiting their own populations so that they are able to use the resources from that exploitation to project more power. And those people will never be interested in setting something up that does anything but enriches them. I don't mean just wealth, but power and influence and the ability to control the globe. So it's very strange to me. And I think I've heard it from Brian Berletic, who I think is great on some things. Like, he thinks of the Chinese ruling class as somehow less mean, less violent,
I heard
less
that.
imperial than the U.S. Ruling class. I think that's a
Yeah.
myth. I think he's wrong. I think they are trying to get out of a box, and they're doing that by building a navy. And he would say, "Oh, they have to build a navy because the U.S. is doing it." Well, once they put U.S. in the box, trust me, and that's what the Belt and Road Initiative.
Naturally.
It's not just a give money out for free stuff. It is a plan no different than the U.S. with its IMF and World Bank to get all these colonies into a debt trap, and then basically make them economically dependent, so you don't have to use your military to control them. Let's be clear: when the debt trap doesn't work, and when there's revolutions in those countries that threaten to nationalize industries, if U.S. doesn't come in to get their stuff back, you don't think China's going to not do the same thing? Of course they will. Of course they're going to go, "Oh, you can take it. You know, we let you have it on the basis of this investment, blah blah blah. But if you can keep it." The Chinese ruling class isn't going to let their shipping nationalized, and so it's just a deeply fictional view of the world that I think we have to abandon, because in the same way that Trump and Obama hopium keep people from realizing the task we have before us, I think multipolar hopium underneath this axis of resistance nonsense, really, which imagines that any of these oligarchs, from Russia to Iran to Syria, has some sort of interest in doing something for the people. And in Scott Ritter's case, I've heard this before, they think that they're actually there to even help the Palestinian people. The oligarchs who run Syria before and now have no interest in helping the Syrian people. Why would you think they're going to help the Palestinian people? They're going to use them like a political tool. And that's in fact what has happened throughout history with these various Middle Eastern oligarchs, is they play little chess games with the Palestinian people's cause. The only way of the Palestinian people being liberated is through a revolution in the Middle East, in that region. And ultimately, the biggest way you could have a revolution in that region is a revolution in the United States that basically pulls out all the tent stakes of all our military bases across the globe. And that part is considered impossible by Brian Berletic. And I don't think Scott Ritter even considers the possibility himself. He doesn't say it's impossible. In the episode that we're posting here, that you should listen to, Brian Berletic explicitly says he's taking the possibility of U.S. revolution off the table, or any revolution off the table, because he just is not going to happen. Well, his thing of multipolar is never going to happen, even if you got rid of a revolution. But I actually think the reason he goes to this notion of multipolar is because he's taken revolution off the table. And once you do that, you are left with nothing but hoping that oligarchs will do something nice for you. Because the possibility of power resting in regular people, you've just taken it off the table. And I don't know what to say other than, like, I don't see any it just doesn't make any sense to believe, well, regular people aren't going to change the world, so maybe these oligarchs will change the world for a better place. Maybe they will be compelled to do it from some sort of balancing act that will happen when all their powers are brought equivalent, and they look at each other and say, "I'm not going to attack you, and you're not going to attack me." That doesn't exist when you have equal powers facing each other. What happens when what happens there is somebody looks for an advantage. And once they feel like they've got an advantage, they take advantage and they look to exploit it. That's a multipolar world. It's a very violent world, just like if we consider the current world, the US hegemony over the entire globe, that's also a pretty damn violent world. Neither of them is going to be peaceful, in my opinion, because they're capitalist. but also because they're ruled by oligarchs who live off the extraction of surplus value of their population and expecting to extract surplus value from other populations if they possibly can.
I'm surprised Brian Berletic believes that China, it just minds their own business and they stay within their lane and they have no intention to exploit the world or anything. It's going to happen if the USA did keep themselves to themselves. I mean, we see it with the way that they're trying to control at mass their country.
Yes.
And that's just going to be filtered on to other places. And they are trying to take over other places. I mean, they have over, I don't know how far anyone wants to go, but it has been an empire that has trying to grow. But you run into empires that are growing and expanding that eventually going to come and cross paths with one another, such as the Soviet Union or, you know, the US and Great Britain coalition and Europe coalition, and then the Asian coalitions. You know, it's just, they're going to cross. So I don't know why he would think that they wouldn't.
Yeah, and even in the episode that I really hope people listen to, because it's a very good episode. I love listening to that guy. And he has his friend Angelo, who also I think is really thoughtful. He poses the idea of like, he talks about the world right now as like, okay, this multipolar, he says, because he kind of says the multipolar world isn't just going to come into existence. It's going to require some growing pains, some birthing pains. And he speaks of these proxy wars as being part of that growing pain to get us to the multipolar world. But then he kind of suggests that those growing pains might not be enough, that it might have to go into actual non-proxy war, but direct war. He doesn't quite say it, but it's World War III. And he's right. If you're going to get to, anybody who's going to be honest about how you're going to get to the multipolar world knows you're going to have to get to it through World War III. Where do you think that takes you? You think that takes you to a stable place? You think that takes you to a place of like, okay, now we have a real true Mexican standoff where we're not, now we all see each other. China sees United States and the United States sees China, and they realize we can't destroy you, you can't destroy us. We'll stay in our lanes. Let's just divide the rest of the world amongst ourselves and be good with it. And first of all, that is not a good world. That is a technocratic control world controlled by two halves. And secondly, but that world doesn't exist. It can't exist. There's no stability there. One is always going to be trying to get over on the other. And so I don't, like, he said a lot of good things in that episode. He was like, you shouldn't vote. There's nothing to be, he is clear that Trump is not a peace candidate. And he is clear that Trump is not just, going to be pushed into war, but he is a warmonger because he's part of the oligarchy that wants to push that war. And he's clear that elections don't work. But he, at the very end of his logic that I really agree with, he comes to this conclusion that the salvation comes from the victory of the axis of resistance. And I at least will give him credit for acknowledging that for him, the axis of resistance does include Russia and China, because I think anybody who's being honest has to know that those are the powers that you're invoking to make your better world. And they're not going to make a better world.
Well, Scott Ritter's talk in Tampa, disheartening the Arab public on, the right or the liberation of the Palestinian people is done because you had to have Assad in that mix.
Right. And there was never going to be any Palestinian liberation. First of all, the two-state solution isn't achievable. It represents nothing salvageable for the Palestinian people. The one-state solution could, if it was part of a revolution that basically no longer believed in even the boundaries that were set by the British and the Western empires and the Western imperial powers in the first place. That's what's going to have to happen in the Middle East. There's going to have to be a gigantic popular shakeup of how that whole region is organized, but organized on the basis of what people want, not on what oligarchs want. And the fact is that Bashir al-Assad is no more an ally of the Palestinian people than Benjamin Netanyahu. They are equally opponents of the Palestinian people. And people don't want to believe that. People want to believe that Assad is some sort of, maybe he's halfway there towards the Palestinian people. And it's absolutely not true. He will sell them out in a second. And you can see how much they're willing to sell each other out by the behavior of Iran and Hezbollah and Russia when things got tough in Syria. There's no solidarity with these people. They will cut you loose in a second if it means their power is threatened. So there's no future with these forces. So I don't know. I'm just going to say this is another brand of hopium that we will have to contend with in the anti-imperial movement. Because if your anti-imperial movement believes that war will be ended when Russia and China win this war, I will say there's a deep illusion in that. Unless you were saying this, unless you were saying that the defeat of the US empire creates an opportunity for us to make revolution in this country. And in that, if you're saying that, then I think, in my opinion, then I think you're on the right path. The reason that Syria is a setback for the US working class is not because Russia is hurt, or which it was. Russians' forces are hurt in that, and Russians' cause is hurt by this. They're going to have a harder time getting into Africa. Israel has a more open lane into Iran. So no question, Syria's fall is a victory for the US-Israeli Western axis, and a defeat for the China-Russia-Iran axis, if you want to call it that. But the reason that that's a setback for working class revolution is anything that strengthens the hand of the ruling class makes it harder for workers in this country to make a revolution. And one of the preconditions, I do believe, for the possibility of revolution is going to be the collapse of the US empire, the external collapse of the US empire, and what happens to US military and forces when they're being told that they have to continue to fight harder and ultimately come to the point where no, we have to turn our guns on our own government. We have to basically go home and liberate our country. And that is how revolution happens. And I believe that's a possibility. Is it what I think will happen? I'm still skeptical, but it is that path. That is the only path that could possibly lead to something liberatory. I don't think it automatically leads to liberatory. I think the process by how we get there matters. But I think if it doesn't include something that looks at the future and does not include the direct intervention of workers and the working army and the working class here in this country, in my opinion, has no hope of bringing us a better world. And the only way I would say that better world is not achievable is if I knew for a fact that revolution was off the cards, could never happen. I believe Brian Berletic believes that's possible, but I don't believe that. I do believe it is impossible for the U.S. working class to unite, to make solidarity with its own military and take its own government down internally. And I do believe that U.S. defeats abroad make that possibility more likely. And that's the part that I think these folks are missing is U.S. I would not celebrate things because of Russian victories. I would celebrate things because of the opportunities to make revolution in this country. And I do believe that's a healthier view of trying to get to a better world.
Amen. I just wanted to add that the axis of resistance came from the axis of evil, which was coined by George W. Bush.
Right.
That included North Korea as well, by the way.
Yeah.
At that time. And was meant for, anyone that's not aligned with U.S. American thought. And that was Iraq, Saddam Hussein, and just anyone who was just not aligned with U.S. American power. Anyhow, so I was having a hard time seeing the importance of this, but I see it now, Andy, and I do appreciate you having had this second part 2 episode. following our first
Yeah.
episode, excuse me. So I do appreciate it, Andy.
Yeah, and I think both you and I, Eduardo, have a skepticism of this possibility of popular revolution, of regular people getting control of their own lives. Would you agree that both of us are like, we think that's the only way it can happen, but it feels like it feels unlikely? Would you agree with that?
It does many times.
Yeah.
I look at the Zapatistas and they're just waiting for other working class revolutions so that when Mexico gets into some other World War III thing, they're going to hop onto their country and take down that's their hope.
Right.
And that's what should be happening. There should be planning. This again, we're not on YouTube anymore though, right?
Right.
But there should be guerrilla forces in every country planning strategically to make their move, and it would be the most, beautiful synchronized orchestra organized around the world, where the way to help Palestinian folk would be to fight your own country. The way to help the Ukrainian folk is to fight your own country. The way to help, the Houthis or the Yemeni,
Right.
I think it's Yemeni, right? Or Yemenis?
Yeah.
Yemen, the Yemen folk, well, the people from Yemen, excuse me, I'm sorry if I meant able to have is to fight your own country. Again, it comes back to fight your own country. And so I'm not seeing that in the USA. I'd like to see that some sort of guerrilla force, and it brings me back to an episode that we have yet to do, which
With Michael
is
Caine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, and I think when he talks about, well, what is your vision of how, and I think that's what he's talking about. And I do think being armed is going to be part of it. I used to think of it as armed resistance, but I actually believe now it's more of a feature of armed defense, because I do think first and foremost, it's about what people are prepared to build as an alternative for themselves and that they're willing to defend, as opposed to arming yourself with just the idea of removing all these crooked oligarchs, which they are crooked. But I think if you don't build a different system side by side with the existing system and you just replace the government, then you reproduce all the same problems, just with nicer people who eventually have to do the same thing, because the force of control, the profit system, still operates as the justification for things. I also want to say that in the same way that Brian Berletic sees U.S. working class revolution as impossible, I see multipolar oligarch created peaceful world. That seems way more impossible to me than working class revolution. And in fact, it seems like it is literally impossible. That will not create peace. So yes, it's far-fetched what we're talking about. It's far away, but I don't think there's another way. And people are trying to think there is another way that doesn't involve regular working people, and that we can somehow get to this promised land, and we can't. And when I say promised land, I just mean a world that is fair, a world that is just run by the people who actually operate in that world, as opposed to run by a small minority who exploits everyone else and uses the products of that exploitation to basically expand their power so they can control more. So that world has to be undone.
I agree.
I don't think there's anything more to. I think, again, it's a simple message, but I wanted to say it. I want to say that people, when you hear this term "axis of resistance," just think an oligarch making my life better. That's what you're saying. Some rich motherfucker who's going to help you. Think about that.
That's yes. You've expanded my definition as well, and going deeper into.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
trusting in this act of service. But the notion of what I've come to understand as the acts of resistance has expanded.
Yeah, and I think that's been intentionally kept a little bit fuzzy, so that we could maybe feel like, oh, let's support that, and don't. There's nothing there. It's like, follow it, pay attention to it, but the only opportunities for us are the ones in our own home country. And I know that you kind of said fight your own country. I know you mean fight our own government, fight our ruling classes, and really
Yeah, I meant
fight for a different kind of world. Build another world for yourself. Build a world you actually believe in, and then defend that when the people who don't want you to have that say, no, you can't do that. We're going to take it away. And that's why people need to be armed, because if we ever build anything worth living in, the people who rule are going to try to destroy it and take it away.
And what you've added, Andy, I'd appreciate, is we should also, beyond just arming, I think we should be building to defend what we are building. I think that's beautifully said as well.
Yeah, and the Zapatistas do represent a piece of that, right?
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
In terms of what they've done on their own land, in terms of, I know what teachers had to do in Oaxaca to defend education and things like that. So there's truth in that as well. So they are not, in my opinion, they're not the perfect vehicle per se, but in terms of people trying to self-determine, we've got a lot to learn from them about saying, no, we will decide how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the appetite for that has to grow among working people.
Yeah, and I think so. Well, I look forward to that episode then.
Yep.
Right, indeed.
Look at these short episodes of ours. It's great, man. We're keeping everything under an hour.
Yeah, it seems like it. We're missing a few folks. Maybe it'll expand if we had a few of our peeps with us.
I don't think. I think part of it is you've been sick. I think you were not like this. You were not thrilled with this episode, so you were like, we'll do it." But this is Andy's thing. I think it's fine. I think there's no much more. Anything more needs to be said. We just do it for another episode some other week. But you won't find it on YouTube.
Right. I wanted to mention one other thing. I forget his name. Hold on. Let me just pause for a second.
Yeah.
Speaking of resistance, I got this news and I just wanted to share this quickly, that there was a former OpenAI employee, whistleblower, that has been found dead.
Yeah.
At age 26. Sukhir Balaji, if I'm not mistaken, Sukhir, last name Balaji. And he went public with concerns about ChatGPT's alleged copyright violations in October and other things he exposed. But I found it scary, really, that there are people like there's been other people that we've mentioned in episodes that are whistleblowers that have been suddenly found dead.
Yep, a lot of them. Boeing had a number of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
it's becoming more common to hear about this. And I think it has to do with the threat. I think there's just real nervousness on the part of the U.S. ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a plan, but the U.S. ruling class is afraid of its population. The Russian ruling class is afraid of its population. The Chinese ruling class is afraid of its population. There's no ruling class that doesn't fear its own working class, because they know they're trying to get over on them. And they know that their future is based on increasing the degree to which they are able to exploit their population successfully. So this is what I think this is a reflection of U.S. imperial instability, the state of the U.S. oligarchy. I think, in the same way that only a few weeks ago, Scott Ritter was like, Israel's going to lose. They're done. Da da da. Now he swings the other way and says Israel's won. Da 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 da. You know, I still believe that the future in terms of the better hand is on the side of the forces of China and Russia. But, I think he's kind of swinging back and forth between they will lose, now they're going to win. I think he's this is a wrong word to put for it. He's just, I'd call it unhinged, but I would say he's unmoored, just kind of swinging back and forth. And Brian Berletic, I feel like, has a sharper view on it. He recognizes that the game is still in play and still understands that Russian production is much higher than that of the West in terms of military production, and that China still militarily, it's still economically and in many ways militarily, its future is brighter than the U.S. But he recognizes also this is not a foregone conclusion that the U.S. will lose, and I think that is true. I can only say that we will lose unless we take the power out of all their hands. U.S. ruling class, Russian ruling class, Chinese ruling class. They all have to have their power taken out of their hands, or else we, regular people, working people, we lose, no matter who wins.
Yeah. And we live in a scary world, and it is anyone that is a threat to the ruling class, anyone who is a threat to the government, will be targeted.
Yep.
So I'll keep a list of the whistleblowers that are dying by suicide.
Yeah, they're being killed.
Yeah. Anyhow, so just wanted to mention that because my condolences to that family, and thank you to the bravery of people trying to expose things.
Yeah, good for him for doing that. And he didn't. I'm not sure he thought his life was necessarily in danger. Maybe he didn't. I don't know, but clearly the stakes are very high for somebody.
So anyhow, well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog on whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube. Well, you can find past episodes on YouTube, and you can always find us, and please subscribe on Rumble and Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. If you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Andy Lipson, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you on Rumble.
Yes.
Ciao.